What if eating pasta could help you get healthier blood sugar levels and potentially help you lose weight? In today's video, I'm going to share with you a breakthrough discovery that I've actually tested in my own life as somebody living with type 1 diabetes that allowed pasta to become a healthy choice. Now, before we get into all the science behind it, I want to break down some of the foundations. So pasta is carbs, right? And if you don't know, you've probably heard about carbs before, right? So what is a carbohydrate? A carbohydrate is something that's built up of a lot of sugars, starches, cellulose, or similar substances that can be broken down to release energy in the body, used as fuel, essentially. It's one of 3 macronutrients in all the foods that we consume and is made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Right, so when we eat it, our body breaks down carbohydrates into usable glucose, and that's what allows us to move, go grocery shopping, exercise, flip the TV channel, whatever it is that you're doing. Now, you've probably heard people talk about carb loading, right? Marathon runners, I've been training for triathlons. I use carbs for that too. There are purposes for carbs, but carbs also get kind of a bad rap. So today I want to break down what you need to know about it and how you can make it healthier. Now, what's interesting about the different types of foods that we consume is that I've already begun experimenting on myself. So I have type 1 diabetes, and I like to use this as a way to experiment because I can alter when the insulin gets delivered. So what I've seen, as you can see here, is high fiber foods digest nice and smooth, slowly. It's a very minimal blood glucose spike. It's like rolling hills. Now, over here, this is what happens when you have simple sugars or carbohydrates that don't have fiber. That can be disastrous. And so as someone living with type 1 diabetes, I need to consider these things in my daily life. But for everybody else, you want to consider these as just healthy decisions that you can include in part of your day to avoid big rushes of glucose followed by big responses of insulin. Instead, just to keep your blood glucose more level, you can look at increasing resistant starches and or fiber as one of your options. Now, when we consume carbohydrates, the body responds by converting it to glucose, which can be used. However, that usually leads to a blood glucose spike in foods like pasta, the more delicious foods typically, and these foods have a higher glycemic index, which is the likelihood to cause a blood sugar spike. We'll get into that more in a second, but first understand that in a non-diabetic, when you have a blood glucose spike from something like pasta, the body responds by producing insulin, which will allow the blood glucose to be transported out of the bloodstream and into cells and storage for later use. Now, in a diabetic like myself, I have to take insulin for those carbs that I consume so that I don't see the blood sugar spike, or at the very least, hopefully not spike as high. Some carbs, though, are going to digest faster than others. So pasta, it's got a bad rap, right? We see a lot of people complain that pasta is a tough one with blood sugars. Now, the reason for that is it's low in fiber. And fiber can really help lower the blood glucose spikes that we see, and so can fats and proteins. So if I were to pair pasta with other types of foods, like a salad, maybe a side of chicken, this can be very beneficial for lowering the blood glucose spike as well. But what if you're not hungry, or what if you only want the pasta? Well, then we have to look at how can we change the molecular buildup of the pasta itself. And if you're here listening on how you can do that, I've got good news for you. There actually was a study done years ago that until recently has not been corroborated, but now there are new articles and studies that back these findings up. But years ago, a group of scientists on a TV show called Trust Me, I'm a Doctor, decided to run this experiment to see if there was a way to make pasta healthier. Now, the theory was that as you cool pasta, you alter the molecular makeup and make it more of a resistant starch. Now, we'll get into what resistant starches are in just a second, but I want to complete what this experiment was so you have the whole picture. So the theory was if we cool pasta down, it should have a lower impact on blood glucose spikes. Now, what was interesting is that they took a group of participants and split it up into 3 different meals. They had hot pasta, fresh, just boiled, and delicious. They had cooled pasta, which had been left in the refrigerator and then consumed. And then they had reheated pasta that was cooked, cooled, and then put into a microwave, right? Now, the first group, they had blood sugar spikes. We knew it, right? Pasta, blood sugar spikes, This is just how it is. But the second group saw an immense reduction in blood glucose spikes. The group who ate the cold pasta, and of course these groups were testing their blood glucose every 15 minutes over the course of 2 hours after they had consumed the pasta to get all the data. What was really shocking though is the third meal, when they consumed the reheated pasta. See, the scientists had assumed reheated, you're making it hot again, you're just gonna bring it back to its original state and still cause the blood glucose spike. However, upon reheating the pasta, they discovered that the blood glucose spike was lowered even further than it was in the cold pasta group, which means hot pasta, fresh out of the pot, is the worst for you, does lead to blood glucose spikes. Cold pasta, very much better, okay, less of a spike. Cold and then reheated pasta, winner, winner, winner. That is what we want to aim for. Now, you might not have the patience to cook, cool, and reheat like me. I kind of enjoy having the pasta right when it's ready, especially because I'm married into an Italian family. My wife, her whole family, love pasta. However, if there's leftovers, I get to win. I don't have to deal with the blood sugar spikes quite as often. So what do we take away from this? If you're looking to reduce your blood glucose spikes and potentially make pasta healthier for you, you might consider cooking it, then cooling it, and then eating it the next day. Because that process, it builds up what we call resistant starches. So when we consume pasta fresh out of the pot, that gets broken down into glucose, blood glucose spikes, we see a less than ideal result, right? Cooled and then reheated pasta, we increase the number of resistant starches, and starches is another variation of carbohydrate essentially. We increase the number of resistant starches, which make it more difficult for our body to digest and break down that starch into glucose, which means the pasta itself is not being broken down into glucose, which would then lead to a blood sugar spike, but it is also not being digested entirely, which means all the pasta you just ate isn't all gonna go into fat storage, which means you're actually getting less calories and a lessened spike from blood glucose just by cooling and reheating your pasta. Now that, to me, is worth the effort. Now, of course, there are some alternatives to this. If you don't have the time or don't want to put that much effort into your meals, you can, like I said, increase your fiber content. Fiber is also not digested entirely and has a similar impact. You can also increase your fats and proteins. Look at some avocado for the fats, maybe some chicken on the side. That can help slow down the digestion and the impact as well. You can go exercise after the meal, go for a family walk. Great way to lessen the blood glucose spikes. There's numerous strategies. In fact, we teach a lot of our clients these as well, and I work with type 1 diabetics. But if you want to look at this from the diabetes perspective, this may even reduce the overall insulin required. So non-diabetics, great for your blood glucose, less in spike, less insulin needing to be produced, but diabetics as well can see a massive benefit from this. In fact, scientists are wondering if increasing the amount of resistant starches consumed, like in this example, would actually benefit pre-diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and even type 1 diabetes outcomes of blood sugars. Fascinating stuff. Now, because I'm a type 1 diabetic and I love to experiment on myself and see what is true and to learn more about my own body and my disease, I'm going to run this experiment and see what happens with different types of pastas. I'm going to be watching to see what happens on my CGM. So if you'd like to see the experiment results, what I want you to do is take a second to comment which type of pasta you would like me to see try, and then I can add them all up, put them into a log, and then run an experiment on fresh, cooled, and reheated pasta to show you guys the CGM graphs of what it looks like as a type 1 diabetic to consume these foods. So I hope you found this one useful. Go ahead, leave a comment of your favorite pasta that you want me to try and experiment with, and I'll make another video in the near future and link it up for you. Have a great rest of your day. I got a video for you right here that I know you'll enjoy next, and I'll see you guys in the next one, and keep up the fight.